Hi and welcome to Clearance. My name is Rotimi Latimer. I'm one of the junior doctors who helped build this software and platform, and hopefully in this video we should give a brief overview about how it would work from the perspective of a doctor or healthcare professional using the service and uploading information onto it, and also at the end of hospital trusts who are using it to extract information for the purposes of occupational health or human resources. So here's a overview of the homepage with a little bit of information. How it would work is people would register, so they can register using their own details. So for the purpose of this, we'll use just a fake name of James Smith, and we'll use an email address which I have access to, but obviously doctors would put in their own email address, whether it's an NHS one or a personal one. They set a password and then they put in their GMC number, which is pretty important, but we'll, for the purpose of this, just put in a fake one. Okay, and I've already used that GMC number before, so it won't let me. So there are certain unique values which we have to put in, the email address and the GMC number, to ensure that no two people are signed up with the same one. So I will use a different set of numbers. There we go. So submission successful. That means we've managed to create an account. We can now log in. This takes us to the login page where we use those details which we put in before. And if you see, this now takes us to a section of a data page where we can put in a little bit more information about ourselves. So and then people can pop in their address. And then quite usefully, as you'll see throughout a lot of the data pages in the website, there is the option to upload files. And the whole software should be available in a desktop version and also in a mobile version. And from just testing it out on my own phone, which is a Samsung, which runs obviously the Android platform, quite helpfully when you get these choose file options, it will give you the option to take a picture. So if people don't have a scanner handy or a printer, they can take pictures of whatever relevant documentation it is that they want to upload and show. Purposes of this and throughout the rest of this demonstration, I'll just use this test Word document that I have here. So that's updated, and then you go to the next page. So what it asks you next are a whole bunch of questions in relation to occupational health, mainly your vaccination history. And the option will be available for all of these, but you can add sort of hints to give doctors and other healthcare professionals an idea of exactly what information we want in each of the drop-down menus. Yeah. And so once again, you can see here, this is where doctors would upload probably sort of an occupational health vaccination history record, maybe a GP record, or sometimes they might have their own privately taken occupational health tests for sort of electives or other purposes. And for most of these documents, at least for me, half of these would actually be probably the same document, but I think it is quite useful to have separate file upload options for them, just in case people have separate documents that have some, let's say, hepatitis vaccinations, and some other places might have done varicella or MMR vaccinations. So I think having the separate options is still quite useful. So that's updated. All of those documents now are sort of uploaded to this particular doctor's profile, along with all this other relevant information, of which, regardless of which job they go to or rotate at, a frequency of every 6 months, every year, for the most part, none of this stuff is really going to change, which is why it's quite useful. It's all stored there. As you'll see a bit later on, the next time they go to their new trust, all that information is stored there, and once they change their selecting trust, that information just gets pushed through. So if we go to the next page, some other details more relevant to, let's say, human resources. One might want to put in their tax code, their national insurance number, recent payslip, utility bills, proof of address, all these common things that are asked when initially being employed by a new trust. And then you can even have the option to put in other commonly asked for things, such as student loan, postgraduate student loan, what student loan plan are they on, and then people can put all of that information in here. And you can see it's got quite an easy user interface. You just work through it. The information that it's asking for is fairly self-explanatory, and you just put it in as you go along. And even forms such as equality monitoring, often you get these forms whenever we start a new job. I thought it made sense, rather than having paper-based forms instead, why not digitize all this information from the get-go. And actually this is quite useful, because you'll see later on when trusts later go in and want to extract data, you can already get this information in spreadsheets and in tables and do sort of other sort of manipulation of it to give you useful information about the sort of equality and diversity in the workforce that you have. So you might select your background. Payment details for the purposes of human resources. This can be either directly forwarded on to payroll departments or used, and the information you'll later see you get in an Excel spreadsheet that can be copied and pasted, which reduces the risk of transcription errors and just generally speeds up the process. They can select whether or not they wish to be opt-in to the NHS pension or not, and then that information naturally passed on to payroll. And on a form such as the previous one, we can easily sort of add in links to PDFs, where if they do necessarily need to fill in PDF documents and send those to HR, then actually they can easily find those documents right on the same web page. This is just useful in case people have been employed by the NHS before. They can put in these details so that the IT departments can sort of onboard these new starters a little bit quicker. Professionalism checks for the majority, I'd say the vast majority of sort of people working in the NHS, the majority of these will be no. So the usefulness of this is that it's a drop-down selection, but when we extract this data a little bit later on in a table, you'll be able to set potentially an if function, or you can select a conditional formatting section where if any of these were to, let's say, be yes, it could maybe highlight them. And there is also the option as well to go into the database system, and if any of these options were yes, it could add a drop down box beneath it saying give details below as is required. So this is telling you if you've had a DBS in the last 3 years, then upload it, but then if not, you can sort of forget about it, and the employing trust will probably have to do another one. And you sort of just keep on working through getting the relevant information that the system is asking for. And each time just uploading it. You can select your previous employing trust, which is useful because obviously there is some overlap with the electronic staff record, and this allows the new employing trust to at least know where the doctor was last employed. They can then use the electronic staff record to pull through their service history, or even they have a record of it for the purposes of background checks or referencing of other sorts. So I'll actually, for the purposes of this, I'll pick, let's say I'm starting at this particular trust. Let's say I'm starting in this year. Let's say 12 months. Now this is, I guess, one of the most important pages, because this is where doctors are essentially then going to select who is the new trust who's employing them. And this is very important because to ensure security of the system and that people's data is only being seen, A, by people that they consent for their data to be shared with, and only for people, only trust and organizations that need to see it. So for instance, if I was now starting a job at Bedfordshire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust, I would select that there, and only this trust is going to be able to access any of the information that I've just put in previously. And my start year will be 2021. My start month will be August. I might be a CT3, and I might be training in anesthetics. So if I just go back to that previous page, I would change that to 2020. That's when I started my last job. If we click update, then actually what you'll see is on the next page, this is where you would confirm all of the data and all of the details that you've put in thus far up until this point. And so it takes just a few seconds to load, but then very shortly you should see it pull through all of that information, and it allows doctors one last chance to confirm that everything they've put in is correct, make sure that there's no details which they've missed, or they can spot any errors. So all the information since the very first page we can now see all amalgamated here together. So it's got the name, the address, the postcode, occupational health history. You can see actually the relevant documents that you've uploaded in support of your occupational health status. All the equality monitoring, bank details, NHS pension, sort of professionalism declarations, and all of this information gets pulled through. So then lastly, what this last page will ask you for is that you confirm that all the data above is true and accurate. You'll select that there. Then you might want to double check that you consent for your data to be shared with the new employing trust listed above. So my new employing trust is Bedfordshire, so this information is only going to be shared with Bedfordshire, as we'll see a bit later on. And then a date of submission is just useful so that when people extract this data a bit later on, they can either do it in order of submission, or you can as well just categorize them and put them into folders and use the information any way you wish. Really, you can cohort it based on people that submitted forms in between a sort of 3-month period or a 4-month period leading up to each common sort of employment cycle in maybe February or August. There's even the option to put in a little signature at the end. Yeah? And so you update this, and what will happen when you update this now is that the email which you've supplied before should then get a confirmation basically explaining everything. And the one thing to just warn people of is that sometimes, annoyingly, it might go to their spam, so that's just some place that they should check as well. And so as you can see now, the email, which is already sort of pre-formatted, tells them, "Dear Mr. Smith, thanks for submitting the relevant information." It will also give them some information regarding how they can use the system the next time they change their employing trust, and I'll go back and show you that a little bit later. And what as well is quite useful is that it will show all of the information that they've put in so far, and it can tell them, please check any of the details, and you can go back to the form and amend them if any of them are incorrect. A couple of formatting errors just with the numbers, which should hopefully be fairly easy to rectify. For some reason it's put them as currencies, but that's something that can easily be changed. So all of this information is here now for them to review themselves. They can have a look at, they can see, and they can confirm it for themselves, and if anything's wrong they can go back and they can change it. And they as well, in essence, almost have a hard copy of all the things which they've put into the system before. So that is everything on the part of the doctors. That's their bit done. Now once they've done that, hospital trusts would now go in and retrieve that information. So the last doctor that we just uploaded was starting at Bedfordshire. So Bedfordshire, the Human Resources Department, would have a particular login which is separate to the Occupational Health Department, because for obvious reasons we don't really need to be sharing sort of employees' health information with people only involved in the HR side, and I think it's important sort of for confidentiality purposes to keep the two as separate as possible. Now as you can see, because we logged in using Bedfordshire's specific login, now when we try and retrieve information, we can only retrieve the information for doctors who've selected Bedfordshire as their new employing trust. And so if we search here, you'll see some other people who've been put in before, and importantly you'll see James Smith, and that's the data record that we just used. You can view the details here in this format. You can export it and download it as a PDF. You can review the documents by opening them up. So this is just a test document, so that's what it looks like. And then you can even go down to the bottom and you can add your own little note to say that actually we verified these documents and we verified these on the 22nd of February. And this can be useful now for when this doctor goes to another trust. Naturally, every trust operates sort of as an independent organization and I guess is responsible for their own checks. But what is useful as well to see is that actually another trust looked through these documents, they verified them, and as they go along, now if another trust verifies them, they can click this, they can change the date. If we go back to the reports, what we can do is you can download the data, and what this would essentially, you can imagine, look like is if you had August of a particular year or February of a year coming up you would then have all the new starters in August and all their information here. You could sort them out by the grade at which they are, you could sort them out by the specialty, or you could sort them out by the start date once people go through successive sort of employment cycles from August to February to October and vice versa. And what's very useful is that you can download the data either in a PDF format, or I think is more useful is an Excel spreadsheet format. Why is this one useful? Well, if we format the cells, we can essentially get a table and a spreadsheet with all of our new employees and all of the relevant human resources information that we need. And now when putting it into the relevant system, we can almost just copy and paste all the sections which we need that are relevant. What's also very interesting is we can go through and we can use conditional formatting on different sections. So let's say we wanted to know any person who had previously had a criminal conviction. Well, then actually we could do conditional formatting, and we could do a highlight cell rule, and we could say any text that's equal to yes. Now right now everyone so far has said no, but if we ever did have someone who for whatever reason had had a prior conviction and this column was to ever come up yes, what you'll see is now you can format each of these individual columns to just say and easily highlight those. Where that will be quite useful is in the occupational health side of things. So let's go into the occupational health tab now. So as we said, there's a separate login. This is the human resources login, and there'll be an occupational health login. Similar thing, same login, but this will be a different password. Same concept, they can only see information relevant to their trust. And now what you'll find is that instead of seeing all of the human resources information, the occupational health team can actually see just the main details of the new employee and the relevant occupational health history. And they can do the same thing, they can verify the documents and they can say the date that they were last verified. They can go back and they can export the data in the same way. So now what you'll see, we've got two tables here. One, this is for occupational health, and another table, this is for human resources. And what you should be able to see is that there is none of the occupational health relevant information in the human resources tab and view, because that information naturally should be kept separate. But here we could now say if someone had previously been exposed to hepatitis C and this column said yes, we can use some conditional formatting and very easily say anywhere that includes the word yes should be highlighted. So rather than occupational health departments going through sort of hundreds of forms and actually sort of fishing out the people who might need sort of in-person reviews or a little bit more support or a little closer look at their documentation, you can actually now, simply based on the answers that people give from a drop-down menu, just go across the different tabs and you can say what you're looking for and easily highlight those people and prioritize them in the processes of new employment cycles. Now, let's close these for a second. How are these useful for the doctors and for hospital trusts when doctors wish to change trust? Well, if we go back now and log back in, so I'm still logged in as the person I was before, and I can go to my new employer tab, and let's say I wasn't going to Bedfordshire, but actually the year later I was going to the University College London Hospitals. I can simply change this. I would probably change the date to 2022, even though it's not an option here yet, and maybe now I'm an ST4 but in the same specialty, and I can update this. And once I've updated this, another important part would be to then look at the final page with the amalgamation of all the information. And once that's loaded, go to the bottom and change the submission date, because that's essentially like signing a paper form to say that this is the date we've completed it and this is the date that we want to submit it. So now we'll see at the bottom, we can ignore the previous employer because the previous employer would now be Bedfordshire, and then we're moving to University College Hospitals the year later. We can confirm the data is true. We can consent for the data to be shared with our new employing trust, so now that's University College London. And then we could update everything and change the relevant date, and as well we could go through and change any information that had changed previously. And now what you'll see is, if we go back to the Human Resources tab, right now I'm logged into Bedfordshire, and what you might be able to see is that James Smith, who was previously here, has disappeared. So his information is no longer stored and retrievable by the team at Bedfordshire, and the same will be the case on the Occupational Health tab. Now if we log out and actually select University College London Hospital, which is the trust that we've changed it to, you'll notice they can only select their own trust, and now you'll see James Smith. So that's the same James Smith that before was in Bedfordshire, but now he's moved to University College London, and his information is now available to be viewed and downloaded by University College London Hospital. Okay? And so essentially doctors would do this as they move from trust to trust to trust, with essentially a very seamless and easy process of updating any relevant information that might have changed, and just updating the trust that they're being employed by so that that information is available to those trusts to be retrieved, downloaded and reviewed. So that gives a brief overview of how clearance can be used both by healthcare professionals and by NHS hospital trusts and boards, by the occupational health departments and the human resources departments. And you can see that it's actually very easy to separate the information to only be visible to the particular people that they need it to be. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this demonstration, and hopefully you might think that this is something which could be of use in your organization.